Thank you, Dr. Hassan. Alhamdulillah. That was very helpful and interesting lecture for all of us, and I appreciate in particular giving us a picture historically of Karbala and giving us a sense of the time and the place, and that way we can relate to the story more because we have a picture and a feeling for the time. And that's very helpful. Thank you. Alhamdulillah. Right now we're going to have a short presentation from the Imamiya medics, and they are coming forward shortly.
Well, thank you very much. Dear brothers, sisters, and friends, Assalamu alaikum. I come to you as a member of the Youth Medics International. That is the youth group of the UN-recognized NGO Imamiya Medics International. Many of you remember me. My name is Jaferia. You might remember me from the play that we had here and other youth groups. I took what I learned from these youth groups and the way you guys have a unity and the way you work together, the way you build on your resources and use each other's resources to accomplish your goals. I use that same mentality to accomplish something with Imamiya Medics International. Our first project with Imamiya Medics International was in the winter of 2005. This was 2 months after the 7.5 magnitude earthquake that struck Kashmir and took 75,000 lives and left 2 million people displaced. We went over there with the original goal of teaching basic life support and advanced cardiac life support to the inhabitants of a certain refugee camp there. However, we found that there was a lot more work to be done. Not only did we get to teach basic life support, but we taught about the basics of medications. The reason was as follows. In the camp that we worked in, it was about the size of a football field with 500 people on it, men, women, and children. They were living in tents, very close quarters, and of course the transmission rate for diseases is much increased in those conditions. Now, Imamiya Medics is donating thousands of dollars worth of medications to this refugee camp. The problem is there's no one trained to dispense those medications appropriately. Myself and some other trained individuals were able to fix that problem. We were able to teach the dispensary managers what medications to give and when. So we were able to help 500 people, and already, this was probably after the third day of being in Kashmir, we were able to do this. And then we went on to network with other groups. We worked with the U.S. Army and acquired 500 vaccinations for the camp that we were working at. And again, keep in mind, what's the cost of this? The only cost that we really paid is getting over there. We paid a ticket. After that, it was all just our motivation and our willingness to help these people that made the project successful. So why am I telling you guys this? It's not just to show off about what I did. It's because myself and some of the other members will be going to professional schools. And again, remember, this is a youth group. So now we're kind of falling out of the youth realm. Me being 24 myself, it's time to now hand this over to the next in line. So I come to you and I ask you, especially the youth, if any of you will be interested, if you have some free time in the coming summers or winters, there are great opportunities not only in Kashmir, but in India, Pakistan, Africa, Iran, and several other countries that Imamiya Medics has established clinics in. If you would like to be involved in some of these projects in the future, you can actually get started immediately. The plan right now, we have about 5 or 6 people that are willing to go back to Kashmir this summer, and we're in the process of getting the word out and trying to raise awareness of the project. So if any of the youth would like to get involved, please come to us. Our poster will be right out there next to the food. So you can just come to us and ask us what you can do. And some of the things that we're doing is we're speaking in mosques and selling little dua booklets. And any other ideas that you guys might have, please come to us and present them. So, again, this is for the youth mostly, because this is our generation. Most of us are first generation in America. It's our responsibility to make sure that our impact is felt around the world. And I'd just like to close with a little quote that the brother said before. He decided that one of the hadiths were, humanity is the family of God. That means that we all have a responsibility to take care of our own family. Be they Muslims, Jews, Christians, it doesn't matter. These people need our help, and we have the resources here to do that. We have the intelligence. The youth, most of us are going to business schools and medical schools. We have the intelligence and we have the motivation. And alhamdulillah, our community, we have the funds to get ourselves over there. So please come forward and accept this responsibility. Also, I know I mentioned that a lot of the things that we did last time were medically related. There's a lot of opportunities for business-related programs. And that's what Brother Zain will talk to you about. He was also on the trip with me. in 2005. He did amazing things, including networking with other organizations, and he'll explain to you some of the microfinance ideas we have for the trip this summer. Thank you very much for your time.
Assalamu alaikum. I'd like to open up with a quote that we have in our brochure. You can get this brochure outside. It's by Iftihar Naqvi. It's one of the refugees I interviewed over there. And this is what he said to me as we were leaving. He said, "Before the earthquake, there wasn't much here. Now there is nothing. You came from so far away, that is enough for us. Your love brought you here to the other side of the world, but when you go back, don't forget us." And so here we are again, talking to you about the plight of the refugees, because they're probably one of the largest displaced populations in the world, besides the Sudan problem and some Southeast Asia problems. Kashmir has one of the worst economic situations in the world. It's not only just because of, the India-Pakistan conflict. It got worse, especially after the earthquake. First of all, these people didn't have much money to begin with. Their life expectancy was around 50, 60 years, which is around sub-Sahara statistics. And the other problem too was that after the earthquake, the little infrastructure that they had, they lost almost all of it. They calculated that they lost about $5 billion worth of economic infrastructure, and they were pledged $2.4 billion. And out of the money that they were pledged, they didn't receive all the $2.4 billion. So this is a huge, huge problem. You're dealing with millions of people. So besides doing healthcare work, we're also going to be doing some socioeconomic and education work. Myself, I'm focusing on microfinance loans. I met with the group of brothers over there who lost their home. They have to support a family of about 12. They don't really have a source of income. And what I did was basically, I would talk to them about business models, the scope of the business model, what would work, what wouldn't. I also met with the co-op of women over there. And inshallah, when we go back, we'll be able to administer these loans to them, so they could start businesses themselves and get back on their feet, and they won't be dependent on people sending charity money over there. So our goal isn't just healthcare, it's also education, it's also sustainability. When you have sustainability, then you're not dependent. And that's one of the other problems of Kashmir, is that they've always felt, I talked to a lot of them, they've always felt like they were second-class citizens of the world. Because either Pakistan would give them hand-me-downs or India would treat them horribly. They always feel like they're always treated as second-class citizens. And if we give them a way to stay healthy, to be educated, and to sustain themselves, then they won't feel like that anymore. They'll be empowered individuals. Inshallah, with your help, we'll be able to continue this work. Appreciate your time, and thank you for having us here. Assalamu alaikum.
Brothers and sisters, that's an example of putting Imam Husain and, of course, our Holy Prophet's words into practice. And that's a blessing to see that type of work. So don't hesitate to be creative and think of ways that you can help, even if it's just a very small way. But that was beautiful. We have to have a little change in our schedule since we are running a little short on time. First of all, I forgot to mention something regarding some people who were invited to join us today at this program. Several senators, including Senator Obama, Senator Lieberman, Senator Biden, were all invited to join us here today, and they all expressed their wishes to have been here, but unfortunately couldn't be here, and sent their regards for the program and hope to participate in the future. It's also a good opportunity for people in government to have a chance to hear the story about Imam Husain and other issues of Islam that need more widely distributed information. They need to hear these types of things as well. So we're glad to hear that they had some interest and hopefully will join in the future. But right now we're going to move on to Dr. Vernon Sugar. He's a professor of religious studies at Kenyon College, which is in Ohio. He teaches courses on Islam and world religions, and he's the author of Religious Performance in Contemporary Islam, Shia Devotional Rituals in South Asia. This was published by the University of South Carolina in 1993. He's also written numerous articles on Islam, and he's traveled widely in the Islamic world as well and conducted research in Pakistan, India, Uzbekistan, and Anatolia. His current research concerns the Alevi Bektashi community in Turkey. In his courses, he helps students to think through some of the basic questions of human existence in the light of the answers provided by Islamic teachings. And if you go to Kenyon College's website, you'll see a list of his courses, and it really looks interesting. So we're glad to have you here, and welcome.
Sorry to have to change the schedule, but unfortunately Delta Airlines probably won't wait for me, so I apologize. I've been living with Imam Husain for the last quarter of a century. I look back now and realize that that's when I began to really examine Imam Husain. And as I was trying to think about what I was going to say today, I realized that other people would say things before me. And so I'll refer to them as I go. But I'd like to start with a poem in Urdu. And please, I apologize, most of you are from South Asia, my terrible pronunciation. But it's an important couplet. Qatl-e Hussain asl-e marg-e Yazid hai. Islam zinda hota hai har Karbala ke baad. Now what's important about this poem, when I first received it, I had gone off to Lahore to study Urdu, and I was very interested in things Shia and in Imam Husain, and was going to majlises and julus. And there was a man who worked for the program who was a calligrapher, who taught calligraphy. Before I left, he gave me a beautiful piece of calligraphy of this poem, which I still have hanging on my wall. And he said, by the way, Mr. Shubal, this was written by a Sunni poet. This was written by a Sunni poet. CNN, MSNBC, all the various Orientalists like Bernard Lewis, who stand up as experts to tell the Shia what they believe. And then I call them up and try to get them to say, no, they're not doing matam because they feel guilty. But part of what they want to do is to divide. They want to demonstrate how everything is different from everything else. So they want to say, the East is completely different from the West. They want to say Muslims are completely different from Christians, and now they want to say that Sunni and Shia have been completely divided from each other for 1,400 years, and that the current political conflict in Iraq is about the issue over who should have been caliph. And that is all wrong. Part of why it's so wrong, and I was happy to see there is a poster out here, is the argument that why Imam Husain died was because he wanted to be caliph. To treat Karbala as primarily about a struggle for power is to misunderstand how people have understood Karbala over the past 1,400 years. And I'm just checking the time here. Okay, thank you. What happened at Karbala is not primarily about politics, because if it was, as Dr. Hashim said, he wouldn't have come with 72 comrades. What had happened was Yazid had demanded bayat. You all know that word. For those of you who don't, he had demanded an oath of allegiance. Imam Husain offered alternatives to Ibn Ziyad at Karbala. He said, I can go back to Medina. He said, I can go to Hindustan. What he couldn't do was to affirm that Yazid had a right to be the ruler. He couldn't let future generations look back and say Yazid was the legitimate face of the newborn Islamic community. What happened was that Imam Husain demonstrated something to all of us, that winning, pragmatism, is not the most important thing. Being is the most important thing. And Imam Husain taught us all how to be, even when there is no hope of winning. What has been missed, I think, about Shiism, and about Islam, and about Karbala by so many people is the role of a very basic four-letter word. It's the role of love. Ishq, ashq, mohabbat. When I was first studying about Shiism in Pakistan, some very wise people put it to me this way. Why is Karbala so important? Because we are all called to love God. See, we always want to talk about ibadat and Sharia and all these different things that are very technical that separate Sunni from Shia, but there's something that does link Sunni and Shia, and that has to do with love. Now, the Shia put this very, very clearly. We're called to love God, but how do we demonstrate our love for God? We demonstrate our love to God by loving those whom God loved most. And who did God love most in all the universe? It even says in Hadith that He created the universe for Him. He loved Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa sallam. that both the Sunni and Shia call Habibullah, the beloved of God. And if you want to show your love for Muhammad, to show your love for God, who should you love? Or who did he love most? Fatima, his beloved daughter, and Ali, his son-in-law. And if you want to show love for Ali and Fatima, who should you show love for? But Hassan and Hussain. Hassan and Hussain, who used to crawl on the Prophet's back when he tried to say his prayers. How many times did Hussein's lips kiss the Prophet's face? How many times did Hassan's lips kiss the Prophet's face? How many times did the Prophet kiss Hassan and Hussain? Why Karbala burns on one level for so many, Sunni and Shia, is that the person who claimed to be the ruler of the Muslims was able to kill and desecrate those very children whose lips had kissed the face of the Prophet. For political reasons, for reasons of power. And the people that Yazid sent forth to do this, Ibn Ziyad and others, did it for political reasons. Imam Husain was trying to demonstrate something else to us. I was having a conversation last night with the leader of your community here, and we were talking about a book that I read I can't say I'd read the entire thing, and a man I met, his name was Sayyid Ali Naqvi. And Sayyid Naqvi wrote a book called Shi'ite and Saniyat. And it's important to note, and the point of what I'm trying to say here is part of the reason that this Sunni poem can speak to the hearts of Shias as well, is that Imam Husain was not just Shahide Shia. He was not just Shahide Musliman. He was Shahide Insaniyat. Of course, what happened at Karbala speaks to the Shia. Because the Shia are raised in the sense of the necessity of loving the Imams. Because they are the awliyaullah. And everyone knows this. But what is not known to some Shias these days, where lines get drawn, is how many Sunnis feel that way as well. When I went to Afghanistan, to Mazar-e Sharif, and I was very fortunate to be allowed to go into the shrine, people pulled me aside and says, you can't just say Hazrati Ali. You have to say Hazrati Ali Shah Mardan. You have to say Hazrati Ali Shah Awliya, because Hazrat Ali is more than just an ordinary man. And we love the Ahlul Bayt. All over the world, I have heard Muslims, Sunni and Shia, say, Ya Ali Madad. This is not just a Shia thing. And the reason is that despite the fact, I listened to the Zakir in the English Majlis last night, he made a very wonderful point that one of the things that the Umayyads tried to do after Karbala was they took that caravan of the survivors and they wanted to take them from town to town so they could humiliate them. And then for decades after, they put their imams in the mimbars so they could stand up and say things that were untrue about the Ahlul Bayt, about Ali, about Imam Husain. But as one of my teachers put it to me, the greatest miracle of that period of Islam was it didn't work. It didn't work. Muslims love Imam Husain, not just Shia Muslims. Muslims love the Ahlul Bayt, not just the Shia. And part of that was because of what happened in terms of tasawwuf. That those Muslims who don't know Imam Ali as Imam Ali know him as Shah Aliyah. They know him as the gate to the city of knowledge. And they love him. And they also love Imam Husain. The thing is that in Pakistan, I'm getting a little nervous. Let me calm down. I'm sorry. I don't want this to be about me. What happened at Karbala is something that, those of you from South Asia know, it's something that both Sunni and Shia remember. The difference is in how it's commemorated. For the Shia, this is a time of sorrow. It's a time for tears. It's a time to remember the loss of Imam Husain. The Sunnis see this as a time to celebrate the great victory of Imam Husain over the forces of Yazid and Muawiyah. But nobody, except for a tiny group of fanatics, think that Yazid was the good guy. Imam Husain is for the entire Muslim world the hero of Karbala. And one of the things, that I would like to talk about for the rest of the short time I have here is why I think that is. And I think it has to do with this notion of insaniyat. First off, I go back to that poem again. Islam zinda hote hai har Karbala ke bab. They killed Imam Husain, and it meant the end of the Umayyads. The Umayyads tried hard and they held on, but they finally failed. They finally fell to the Abbasids. And the Abbasids came to power claiming they were coming to power for the Ahlul Bayt. And of course, for those of you who know your history, realizing that they could do that, they proceeded to start slaughtering members of the family of the Prophet. And part of the reason there are so many Shia in South Asia is that many members of the Prophet's family, in fact, had to flee into South Asia to escape the Abbasids. Because the symbol of Imam Husain and his descendants as the possibility of resistance and justice was such a powerful thing that the Abbasids were terrified as well. The Abbasids couldn't kill it either. They couldn't kill this idea. And what is that idea? I think that we have to, and this is my own opinion, and if I'm speaking wrong, let the sin be mine, and, I hope I'm not leading anybody in the wrong way. I don't think it's an accident that the Quran tells the story of the creation of Adam multiple times. I don't think it's an accident that the Quran makes such a big deal about the fact that God offered the universe to everything as an amanat, but only Adam accepted it. And most importantly, I think it's very important, that story about the day of Allah. Because all human beings were taken forth, according to the Quran, from the loins of Adam, and the Lord said to them, Alastu rabbikum, am I not your Lord? And we all said, and the way the Quran understands humanity, we all affirmed that. We all said yes. There are those who believe that we are basically animals and the purpose of culture is to teach us to be refined and to not kill and to be altruistic and to care and to love and be willing to self-sacrifice. But that's not the view of the Quran or of Islam. The view of the Quran and of Islam is that human beings were made, Adam was made from clay, but God put his ruh into him. Some of you who know about Mansur al-Hallaj, there's a big debate because Hallaj tries in one of his texts to argue that the mistake Iblis made was he wouldn't bow down before Adam because God had said not to bow down before things made of clay, and maybe he was being a monotheist. And I was talking to some Alavi Bekashis in Turkey, and I said, well, what do you think? And they said, well, what do you think? And I said, I think Iblis was wrong. He says, yes, but do you know why? And I said, no. And they said, because Iblis was not being asked to bow down before the clay. He was asked to bow down before the ruh that was in the clay. God teaches us through human beings. That's why Adam was the first prophet and the first man. God teaches us through the examples of his prophets. God teaches us through the examples of his imams. And not just his imams. Because when we look at Karbala, when we see Karbala, we see how to be. Not just Imam Husain, as powerful as his example. That's why it takes 10 days to explore it. Because all of us, I saw it written out in the hall here. Every day is Ashura, every place is Karbala. Isn't it? Aren't we all asked every day to make moral choices? To choose between the path of ease, to choose to trying to find a polite way to say this, to kiss up to power, to please the wealthy and the powerful who can help us get better jobs and make more money and do the things that we want. How many times are we at our own personal Karbala every day? And we're being asked to choose. We're being asked to choose how to be. And how do we know how to be? Because we look at those stories. We look at, one of my favorites is the story of Hur Riyahi. He had been offered the province of Rai if he would just go along with Ibn Ziyad and force Imam Husain to give bayat. And at the last minute, when it was sure that Hussain was going to be killed, he left Ibn Ziyad's camp and he went to Imam Husain. And Imam Husain looked at him and said, "Today you are truly hur. You are truly free." That's a wonderful story. That's a story you hear it once, it never goes away. It's such a powerful story. In the story of Karbala, we see people deal with the loss of husbands. We see people deal with the loss of sons. We see people at a moment when all of the hierarchical things we normally think about, our status in the world, all of those things are pushed aside, they're pushed away, and we look and see, what does it mean to be a true human being? The purpose of Islam, I suggest to you, is not to replicate more Muslims. The purpose of Islam is not to make more Muslims. The purpose of Islam is to make truly human beings. That's why God has always taught through the medium of human beings. That's the message of Islam and the prophets. That's the message of Shiism. That's the message of the Sufi tradition that God teaches through the awliya. That we need to be guided by others and by each other. And if we do that, if we can become that, then we do something remarkable in the world. And now let me suggest something else. That's why this story speaks beyond just Shias and just Sunnis. Because humanity is born again after every Karbala. Because why does this story resonate within us all? Within those of us, I mean, I consider myself a Muslim, but I certainly have lots of Christian and Jewish and Buddhist friends who I deeply respect because I see in them true humanity. Because it wasn't just the Muslims who were pulled from the loins of Adam and said that they affirmed that God was the Lord. Humanity is what this is all about. When Imam Husain was called Shi'ite and Saniyat, that was saying something important. Because if we can find that humanity in all of us, if we can find where that is, we can do remarkable things. And sometimes, there's all kinds of ways in which Islam divides. It divides over this people do the ritual this way or they do the ritual that way. Another way is that, people want to do Sufism because they want to do something magical, but a very wise Shia in Pakistan told me, a lot of people, they want to get involved in mysticism so they can learn to fly or they can go into the ghaib or they can tell the future. He said, try to find a sheikh who's a good man, who's an honest person. There is no greater miracle than a person who has only one face. That's who Imam Husain was. He was a man with one face. And by the way, it's not just the men, because what would we even know about Karbala if not for Zainab? What would we even know? We forget. One of the things I love about the Shia tradition is the power of feminine piety, the power of the women of Karbala, the power, because they weren't just important because they were related to Imam Husain. They were powerful examples of humanity in their own right. All that suffering at Zainab has the ability to stand before Yazid and tell him he was unjust. How many men would have had that? So when I look to this tradition, when people ask, I've had people say, you're a 6'3" white guy from Oklahoma, why did you become a Muslim? Is it okay? It's because I see in these stories, in these narratives, the best of what humanity is. And those stories find their way in, Rumi, Attar, probably Sunnis, although I'm not sure. They may have well been. I know people who argue very strongly Shamsi Tabriz was a Shia. On one level, that doesn't matter so much. Again, in Turkey, about 25% of the population are part of the Alevi tradition. And what's interesting is that they have all the best poems. Some of you know who Shah Ismail was, the founder of the Safavid Empire. Did you know he was a Turk? And that his pen name was Shah Hatay, the king of mistakes. And his poetry is still the basic poetry of the Alevi community in Turkey. And that poetry is sung not only by the Alevis, because there's this wonderful musical tradition. The Sunnis do it too. The secular leftists sing that poetry as well. Why? Because Imam Husain serves as a model for those people who were willing to stand up against oppression, who were willing to stand up against injustice. And the reality is I think that we have within us as human beings, that it's a message of Islam, that it's part of our humanity, that just as we are drawn back to our Lord, we are drawn towards justice. We are drawn to want to speak truth to power. That's why, and I think I'll end with this because I don't want to take too much time here, but I think this is important, that some Christians see the problem of sin as a problem of will. Not all. But that's why the Quran and Islam tends to see the problem of sin as a problem of forgetfulness. That's why the word dhikr is so important. Because the problem for human beings is to be reminded who we really are. You know, at Karbala, for me the most horrific image, and I'm not sure if it's real or not, I don't know how historical it is that the people who killed Imam Husain, the more they turned away from the Ahl Bayt, the more they turned away from the Nur, the more they became like animals, and in the end they took the blood of the Imam and put it under their eyes like surma. Because they lost their humanity. Imam Husain was showing us how to be human. Karbala is also showing us what happens when we forget our humanity, when we behave like animals. Haji Bektash, the great Anatolian saint, said, Marifat is hayata, hayvan hayata. A life without gnosis, a life without real knowledge, a life without knowledge of God is the life of an animal. And we're not animals. We only become animals when we forget. That's why the person who sits on the minbar and tells us about Imam Husain is called a zakir. Because he's reminding us. And when he reminds us about Imam Husain, he reminds us about God. And when he reminds us about God, he reminds us to be human beings. That's what I've learned from Imam Husain. And as I said before, I'm always nervous talking in an Imam Bargar or a masjid because I don't want you thinking I'm a religious teacher or that I have any special insights. And if I've said anything wrong, as I say, as people have for generations in Islam, I beg forgiveness from God. But I do believe this to be true. That the point of Imam Husain, the point of Islam, is to become the best human beings we can. I am told the Holy Prophet said, and somebody showed me the number of the hadith, the best among you is the best in akhlaq. The best among you is the best in akhlaq. Where do we see that more than in Karbala? Whether we're Muslims or Jews or Christians, or just people who care about justice, where do we see that more? That's why the light of Karbala will continue to burn. That, I believe, is why we can find ways. You know, the fact that Sunnis and Shias and others can love Imam Husain, if we can come together in the love of Imam Husain and what we did, imagine how much stronger Islam can be. Imagine how much better this world can be. Thank you very much.
Alhamdulillah. Now that gave me everything I personally have been wanting to hear for such a long time. What is this message? What does it mean for us? How do we take this into our lives? How is this message for really everyone? It's really remarkable. Thank you so much for that great presentation. We really appreciate that. We're going to, again, change our schedule just a little bit because Imam Majid has to get to a wedding. And we don't want him to not be there for that. I will have a very unhappy bride. But in any event, let me introduce Imam Muhammad Majid. He's the Executive Director and the Imam of the All-Dulles Area Muslim Society called the Adams Center. And he's also the Chair of Fairfax Faith Communities in Action, a member of the Interfaith Conference of Metropolitan Washington Assembly, and the board member of the Fairfax Youth Partnership. He lives in Northern Virginia with his wife and 5, mashallah, girls. And he is also the son of a leading Islamic scholar who was an Azhar graduate and a Mufti of Sudan. And he is very, very well educated in Islam. And I have to say, it's always been my pleasure to hear him speak because he too also brings a deep love of Allah straight from his heart to you, the audience, to whomever he's speaking with, and it's a pleasure to have him here in this interfaith dialogue, and we welcome you, Imam Majid.
بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الأطهار أما بعد. I cannot follow this beautiful presentation, but I'll try to do my best to share some of the insight what I think to be shared in this beautiful occasion. First of all, I would like to thank my beloved Imam Sayyid Naqawi for inviting me for this beautiful community, and inshallah I'll make it inshallah not to be the last time to be here. I would like to visit this community inshallah some other time as well. To speak about Imam Husain, I feel I'm too little to do that in this afternoon, because no words will be able to describe who Imam Husain alayhi salam was. But I'd like to find a few moments to speak about how can we learn from the examples of Imam Husain alayhi salam. First of all, that I'm from Sudan, and Sudanese have a lot of love for Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam. If you wrong the Sudanese, if you wronged him, he will say to you, Wallahi, I've been wronged like Al-Hassan and Hussain were wronged. The example of injustice is Ahl al-Bayt injustice. When Ahl al-Bayt been wronged, that means he really feels he's been wrong. You know, as my father, rahimahullah, said to one of the people who come and complain to him, he said, this man have wronged me as Al-Hassan and Hussain alayhi salam were wrong. My father said, this is very severe complaint you make against this person. If that would be the truth, I don't know what kind of justice I'm going to bring to you, because no matter what we do, we cannot do justice for Al-Hassan and Hussain. It was extremely wronged in a way that no matter what Muslims do, they cannot make it up. Now, when people talk about Al-Husayn alayhi salam, we have to put this in context. The first context is that how much Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam loved Al-Hassan and Al-Husayn alayhi salam. And when I read what scholars have wrote about Al-Husayn alayhi salam and Al-Hassan, I can imagine those people who wronged him and commit this crime, they have not seen the connection. If you wronged the children of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, you have wronged the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. If you spill the blood of the children of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, you spill the blood of Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That's what it is. They cannot claim any belief in the Prophet or connected to the Prophet by killing his children. Therefore, when you talk about Al-Husayn alayhi salam, you have to be in the context that the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he named Hussain. Wasn't he? He's the one who gives him the name. And one day, Al-Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he visited Fatima alayha salam. And he found that Hussain was crying alayhi salam. قال إن هذا بكاء الطفل هذا يؤذيني. He said, the crying of this child disturbed me, hurt me. If Rasulullah said the tears of Al-Husayn hurt him, how about his blood on the Karbala? Therefore he said to her, in Bika هذا الطفل يؤذيني. And that's why he will come to Fatima alayhi salam and says, علي بأبنائي or بني, bring to me my children. And we'll start hugging them and kissing them and smelling them. And when Fatima alayhi salam does not find Al-Hassan and Hussain around, she knows where they end up. She goes directly to Prophet Muhammad home and finds them there. That's where they go. Prophet Muhammad one day, he kissed Al-Hassan and Hussain. A Bedouin man sitting next to him, he said, تُقَبِّلُونَ أَبْنَاءَكُمْ? Because Prophet was so much, kissing them and so forth, and he was actually was taking his tongue out to make Al-Husayn alayhi salam laugh. And he said, Rasulullah really caring about them. He said, you do that with your children? He said, Rasulullah said, yes. He said, I have 10 children. I never kissed one of them. And Rasulullah said, Man la yarham, la yurham. A person have no mercy toward others who will not receive no mercy. The description of Imam Husain, when he described Imam Husain, who he was, first of all, in beauty, was just like Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. كان أشبه بالرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم. When you see Al-Husayn in physical descriptions, you see Al-Mustafa صلى الله عليه وسلم. In his eloquence, Al-Husayn alayhi salam was the best in his speech. When he talked, he was very eloquent, just like his grandfather صلى الله عليه وسلم. In his wisdom, in his hikmah, he and his brother Al-Hasan alayhi salam, we told the story in Sudan. Every Sudanese will memorize this story. When they tell you to be wise, they give you an example of Al-Hasan and Hussain alayhi salam. When they saw a man making wudu, but he meant it the wrong way. Then Al-Hasan and Hussain came to the man and said to him, oh uncle, me and my brother, we have a dispute. Who will make best ablution? Can you show us? And therefore they made the same ablution, the same wudu for the man. And the man, he gets to know that he made a mistake. That's how those children of Mustafa told this man. Now, why Al-Husayn alayhi salam decided to stand against the tyranny of Yazid? As our speaker eloquently said, this was not a struggle for power. He would have, if he compromised with Yazid, Yazid would have given him anything he wants. If he were for money, he would have gotten all of it. But after the poisoning of Al-Hasan, was poisoned, I believe that strongly, Al-Husayn alayhi salam realized that if he does not stand against this tyranny, and it is not from the family of Rasulullah to do that, to set the example and the model, this model of rulership of Yazid and the Umayyads will be accepted. And I will tell you, and this is my belief, the reason that the story of Al-Husayn has not been told in many quarters in Muslim countries, because we end up with kingdoms. Therefore, teaching Al-Husayn models in public schools and so forth would trigger in people's mind this is not the best model, otherwise Al-Husayn alayhi salam would not have given his life. And that's why there's a suppression. There's not that much talking about the model of Al-Husayn alayhi salam. He stood against the tyranny because he realized that, as one of the great scholars who gave his life for Islam said, I will say it in Arabic and I will say it in English, إن كلماتنا تظل عرائس من شمع حتى إذا ما بتنا في سبيلها كتبت لها الحياة ودبت فيها الروح. Our words will be like a doll made of wax or words. Until we give our life for it, then God puts life into it, become alive. Therefore, Al-Husayn alayhi salam did not only preach or talk against tyranny, but he decided to fight it physically. Now, the principles which Imam Husayn alayhi salam, he stood is the teaching of Al-Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He says, the best of jihad is to stand against tyranny. The best of it. When he left Mecca, going towards Kufa, many people tried to have him to change his mind. But Imam Husain, alayhi salam, he realized if we were to listen to those people, then the Umayyad would say, even someone like Al-Husayn has given up, all of you have to give up. Don't try it. And that's why the Umayyad have spread the rumors that Al-Husayn alayhi salam was willing to give bay'ah to Yazid. And this was their propaganda. If you would have done that, as by the way, one of the scholars of Islam wrote a book about the Imam Husayn called Abu Shuhada, the father of the martyrs. And this man is named Al-Aqqad. He said, Kazabu, they have lied. If he was to have to give bay'ah, would not have left Mecca walking all of this distance. We could have done it there. The Imam al-Husayn, many people, some Orientalists, they saw that Imam Husayn have done this with no planning. He just get up and says, I'm gonna, do this. He contacted people of Kufa, Musa ibn Aqil. He contacted people and he gathered support. But one of the things that's relevant to our time, dictatorship always use two ways to try to keep their power. Intimidating people or buying people. And that's what the Umayyad did. Intimidated people and put money out there to buy people. Now, I don't want to make my speech too long for you because I know there's better speakers to come after me. But I would like to say that someone may ask a question. How come, and I heard this by the way from some Sunni, they said, how come the victory did not come to the grandson of Rasulullah, to the Ahlul Bayt? How come it did not come to them? And that's one of the propaganda of the Umayyad. I've been reminded, and I remind you, that Hamza radiallahu anhu alayhi salam, he got his life in Uhud. I remind myself and you that Yahya, with the Christian called John the Baptist, was the prophet who was slaughtered. Martin Luther King in America was killed before he had seen the real civil rights being advanced. People who stood for what is right, they stood in principles. And the victory, it is us and people come after us that keep that story alive and says that is the model for standing against tyranny. And that's why it's not necessary to see the victory in your lifetime, but to plant the seed for it. And finally, I would like to say this, that I grew up in a culture, as the Prophet said eloquently, where there's a lot of poetry of Ahlul Bayt. If we were to resolve the problem today, you see in the world between some extremists on both sides of some Shia and Sunni and some people who like to divide the Muslims, I think Ahlul Bayt can unite the Muslim Ummah. If the people just gather to talk about Ahlul Bayt and the love of Ahlul Bayt, that will generate love in the Muslim Ummah. Because the love of Ahlul Bayt will lead for us to love one another. Love of Ahlul Bayt is, as I said, the glue that brings the Muslim Ummah together. Because the blessing and the barakah of Ahlul Bayt will spread all over the Muslim world. Because if Muslims sit and talk about Imam Husain and Imam Hassan alayhi salam and love Ahlul Bayt from the bottom of their heart, Allah will put the love in my heart and your heart for one another. We need more of this gathering. More of people to speak about what Ahlul Bayt have brought to Islam alayhi salam. If without Ahlul Bayt, my brothers and sisters, a person will not claim true love to Islam. It will be a hypocrite. A person will say, I love Islam, but he doesn't love Ahlul Bayt Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And therefore, let us teach our children in this masjid and Adam Center and so forth to gather to speak about Ahlul Bayt. The youth to love Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. If you do that, you will see a lot of goodness will come out of that. Jazakum Allah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
For those of you who may not know, this is not the first time Imam Majid has lectured about the Ahlul Bayt. He's done 2 series that I'm aware of at the Adam Center itself. One on Imam Jafar Sadiq, which I believe was more than 1 week, is that right? And another on Imam Ali. And when I first heard that, I was so pleased because I do enjoy visiting the Adam Center and being part of that community as well. And it's beautiful to have this opportunity to put aside, how do you want to hold your hands? How do you want to do this? How do you want to put aside these things and come together with the key issues, the key message, which is truly for everyone, no matter what you call yourself. And alhamdulillah, we have leadership that does this, so it's really a pleasure to have it here. I'd like to move on to another one of our speakers. Again, you can see that we really are very blessed today with such excellent speakers. Our next speaker is Dr. Reverend Elias Mallon, and he is a native of New York, one of my favorite places, New York City. He was educated at the Catholic University in Washington, D.C., and he also attended Eberhard Karl Universität in Tübingen, Germany. He holds graduate degrees in Hebrew Bible studies and a doctorate in Near Eastern languages, which, of course, as many of you know, having that knowledge of the language behind the revelations really enlightens you a lot. He has also taught at the American University here in Washington, D.C. and the University of Washington in Seattle. He was also on the faculty at the Ecumenical Institute of the World Council of Churches in Basel, Switzerland. And Dr. Mallon has also been involved in interreligious dialogue since 1985. He has been engaged in the Christian-Muslim dialogue of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of New York with the National and World Council of Churches. And he has published several articles on Christian-Muslim relations and is the author of Neighbors, Muslims in America. So we welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, I am deeply honored and feel privileged to be able to speak on Imam Husain Day. I remember several Imam Husain days in New Jersey, one at the Al-Khoui Foundation, Charitable Foundation in Jamaica, New York. I hope that some of my Shiite friends from Jersey would have made it, but I don't really see them here, but it's always good to make new ones. And I thank you very much for inviting me. Normally, when I speak at a conference of Muslims, be it Sunni or Shiite, I try to limit myself to topics whose reference are Islamic. And that has been particularly easy when I have spoken at Imam Husain Day conferences. At those, I've been able to draw on the history of the tragedy of the 10th of Muharram and the 61st year of the Hijrah. I have been also able to draw on the considerable spiritual resources which Shiite Islam has to offer. The Nahj al-Balagha, the mystical poets, or the great theological traditions found, for example, in the writings of people like Allama Tabatabai. But this time my approach is going to be slightly different. While I am profoundly aware of the events at Karbala some 14 centuries ago, and painfully aware of contemporary events in Karbala, Samara, and other places, I would like to use a slightly different starting point. The reason for this is Mr. Azmat Hussain, who generously and kindly invited me to this gathering, also asked me to speak about Imam Husain ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib, not just in his relationship to the people of the Shia, not just in his relationship to Muslims in general. Rather, I have been asked to look at Imam Husain in a wider context that can draw a relationship with other traditions, my own tradition being Roman Catholic Christian. And so with some trepidation, that is what I would like to try to do today. In the New Testament, there is a collection of letters which Paul of Tarsus, for us Christians, St. Paul, wrote to different communities around the eastern half of the Mediterranean. Some of these letters are very brief and personal, while others are longer and deal with Christian faith and practice. In his second letter to the Christians of the Greek city of Corinth, Paul closes the letter with some personal reflections. In those reflections, he speaks of some affliction that he had, but doesn't go into the nature or the detail of the nature of the affliction. He merely says that God gave him the affliction to keep him humble. And generations of New Testament scholars have pondered or given a reality guess at the nature of Paul's infirmity. Paul mentions that he often prayed that God remove the affliction which seems to have been limiting, if not debilitating. In that letter, in chapter 12, verse 9, Paul states that he receives a revelation from God in answer to his prayer for relief. The answer, however, is not the answer Paul hoped for. The answer is, my grace is enough for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. Christianity and Islam, as you well know, have had very different experiences in what I call our foundational periods. We Christians believe that Jesus was crucified, raised from the dead, and then ascended into heaven. For almost 3 centuries after the time of Jesus, Christians experienced sporadic, but sometimes very severe persecutions in the Roman Empire. It was not until 3 centuries later that Christianity became a legalized religion in the empire. As a result, suffering has played an essential role in the development of Christian self-understanding. That is not, however, to say that for Christians something which is either easy to take or to understand. There is always the question how and why a God who is good and all-powerful would or could let a just person suffer and even suffer death. While suffering has played an important role in the development of Christian self-understanding, we Christians still look upon suffering as an evil, at times a mysterious evil, but nonetheless an evil. Within the context of the citation from Paul's second letter to the Corinthians, within this context, the citation from Paul's second letter to the Corinthians makes an interesting and perplexing point. Somehow, God's power is made perfect in weakness. When we look at the events of Karbala, it is clear that it is an epic story about the suffering and the death of a just man. While it is rich in symbolism, the events of Karbala is not merely symbol, it is history. The events have symbolic power, to be sure, but nonetheless they are brutal in the most concrete way. The almost uncontrollable rage of Yazid contrasts with the almost unnatural calm of Imam Husain. There is a contrast between the power of the forces of Yazid and the mere 72 companions of Imam Husain. Even the death of Imam Husain's companions, tragic as it was, is contrasted by the image of the death of his infant son. Dying of thirst in his father's arms, the infant is shot with an arrow and killed. The death of the Imam's fighting companions was tragic, but heroic. They were fighting. The death of the infant son is incomprehensible. Even the force and the brutality of Ubaidah ibn Ziyad contrasts with the strength of Zainab, who had no military strength at all. And yet, despite Zainab's total lack of military power, she is able to save Ali ibn Hussain, son of Imam Husain. In that act, the powerless Zainab totally neutralized Yazid's attempt to wipe out the family of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib. The story has been told over and over, and the followers of Ali, the Shia Ali, recall, commemorate, and even reenact the martyrdom of Imam Husain every year during Ashura. There are many parallels between what the people of the Shia do during Ashura and what we Christians do during Holy Week. And the parallels run deeper. While the pain of what Good Friday signifies for Christians and the pain of the martyrdom of Imam Husain holds for Muslims is real and at times intense, there's always the question which lurks in the background. It is not always conscious, it is rarely asked, except by children. Why did God let a just man die? And not just die, but die brutally. And in the case of Imam Husain, with almost his entire family and entourage. To all appearances, it looks like in these instances, not only has death triumphed over life, but evil has triumphed over goodness. We Christians can speak of God's love, and Muslims can speak of God's sovereignty, and both are very real and very important. Nevertheless, we are human beings, and as such are beings who question, why did this happen? How could God let this happen? What does it all mean? At this point, at least for me as a Christian, Paul's revelation intersects with human experience. In some mysterious way, God's power is made perfect in human weakness. This is not the magic answer that makes everything right. It certainly doesn't make the death of a just person right, but it is an invitation to look deeper. There is a strong tendency in all of us to imagine God in our own categories. Each of us in our own way has a tendency to bring God down to our own level. Deep down, we have expectations of God. We have a tendency to expect God to behave like an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-merciful copy of ourselves. That is to a great extent understandable. God has revealed attributes such as kindness, knowledge, justice, etc., that are very similar to human attributes. However, the Muslim expression, Allahu Akbar, should be the constant reminder that God is other. More than just God is great, Allahu Akbar is the affirmation that whatever we say and think about God, God is more, infinitely more. In the Christian and Jewish traditions, we find this in chapter 55 of the book of the prophet Isaiah. In that chapter, God says, "My thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways. As high as the heavens are above the earth, so high are my ways above your ways, and my thoughts above your thoughts." Yet we remain human, and our questions do not go away easily. Why does a good man suffer and even die violently? When I think about the statement, God's power is made perfect in weakness, it reminds me forcibly that God is God and I am human. While I may try hard to pattern my life according to what I believe is God's revelation, God ultimately remains God. Whether you are a Muslim who believes that God is closer to you than your jugular vein, or I am a Christian who believes that God has chosen to relate to humanity in a special way in Jesus, we both believe that God is ultimately other. Can you hear the capital O? God is not just a projection of ourselves. While we may agree that God is totally other, there are nonetheless moments in history, in our own personal lives, where that is revealed with a frightening clarity. The death of Hussain would be one of those instances. His death, his martyrdom, shatters all our notions of justice, goodness, and what is right. Most of all, it may shatter some of our precious notions of what victory is. For most of us, victory is the good side winning. And of course, we all consider ourselves to be on the good side. With the death of Hussain, the good side did not win. Our human notion of victory just simply does not apply here. We are thrown before the utter otherness of God. We are faced with God as sovereign, God as mystery. Several times I've mentioned that as human beings we question. I believe that is true in both of our traditions. But human beings are also believers. Questioning and believing are not mutually contradictory, and have never been in our traditions. My Christian tradition has always had the notion of what we call fides quaerens intellectum, faith seeking understanding. Your tradition, especially among the people of the Shia, has always held ijtihad, the struggle to understand and to live in accordance with God's will in high regard. Sometimes seeking that understanding is not easy. Sometimes ijtihad, the struggle, is very hard. In fact, I'm not sure they're ever easy. But we both believe they are eminently worthwhile. The martyrdom of Imam Husain is a challenge to all people of faith to re-examine our own particular faiths. Have we given in to the temptation to look upon God as a projection of our own desires, dislikes, fears, expectations, or can we deal with God as the one who is infinite, infinitely good, infinitely just, infinitely merciful, but not necessarily in the way we might expect or even want it? It's very hard for us to grasp, but maybe in the martyrdom of Imam Husain, the power of God is made perfect. Perhaps in the death of Imam Husain, God powerfully shows us that God's victory and God's strength is not dependent on human strength. In Imam Husain, God has given tremendous grace, strength, and meaning to millions of people over centuries. God's power has been made perfect in weakness. Perhaps in the death of Imam Husain, God powerfully shows us that human victory, the apparent victory of Yazid and his forces, is ultimately empty. The victorious Yazid is merely a blip on the radar screen of history, whereas Imam Husain has been the inspiration for countless millions. In God, the dead Hussain is really victorious, and the victorious Yazid is really the loser. God's power is made perfect in weakness. Ancient Christians used to say that the blood of the martyrs was the seed of the church. It was the proclamation of their belief that somehow In some mysterious way, through all the sufferings and persecutions, God was still in charge and was able to accomplish His will, not only despite, but sometimes even through the plans of people who wanted to do evil. Clearly, the blood of Imam Husain has been the seed of a rich tradition of belief and of holiness in Islam. Although it is not always, and maybe never, easy to understand, it is clear to us that even in what appears to be death and defeat, God is still victorious, and as was said to St. Paul, God's power has been made perfect in our human weakness. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mellon. It's really exceptional to have someone as yourself join in this discussion. It takes time and effort to learn about something that's not within your own scope, and then to come and bring it and share it with others and reach into this information and pull out meaning for all people is really wonderful. Thank you for being part of this program. Our last speaker is, for those of you who know, your Imam. And for those of you visiting today, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Imam Naqvi. He's an accomplished and well-known scholar, and he's originally from Lucknow, India, where he pursued his master's degree in psychology, philosophy, and economics. Lots of work, lots of different ways of seeing the world. He also did a comparative study on different religions, and then he obtained his master's in Islamic theology and Islamic jurisprudence. And he's worked on many humanitarian projects throughout the world. He also is very active in motivating young Muslims, as you can see from this program, so successful today. He created the Jaferia Youth Group, which has become one of the most active youth groups in the nation for Muslims, and currently he serves as the resident scholar of the Jaferia Islamic Center, the spokesperson of the Council of Shia Muslim Scholars of North America, and chairman of the Islamic Information Center, if that wasn't enough. So we welcome you and thank you for your closing remarks.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على المرسلين لا سيما أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين. I begin in the name of Allah, the both beneficent, merciful, and peace and blessings on all the prophets, beginning right from Adam to our last prophet and their progenies. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and a very good day, and welcome again to this wonderful session where we are talking for a very great personality of human history, that is Imam Husain, peace be upon him. We have heard a lot of good talks from different scholars, and our theme that you're seeing on the banner, Karbala, and the topic that we are discussing here today, the defender, Imam Husain, the defender of justice, freedom, and equality, and rights, human rights. There's a difference between defending your own self and defending the entire humanity. It's very easy to protect you from evil and from bad. It's very tough when you have the responsibility of not only of yourself, but for not only the people living at that time, but the later generations to come. And Imam Husain has that kind of challenge in front of him. Remembrance, we have talked before, the previous speakers, how important is that, and why all of the holy scriptures, divine scriptures, and Quran is no different because it's the finality, it's the last message and revelation of the God, Allah, the Almighty, which is emphasizing again and again to remember, because remembering is a way that is the acknowledgement of the favors done to you by those great people. And that's why you see this Lincoln Memorial, that's why you see Thomas Jefferson Memorial and all those pictures of, in Pakistan, Qaid Azam and those idols of Mahatma Gandhi in India. What are these? Just a message that we acknowledge those favors that they have done for the humankind. And we are here for the same thing. You know, that remembrance, as God says in Quran, that remember me and I remember you. So remembrance is very important. Now, you have heard before, and I will be very precise because we are running out of time, and being a host speaker, I don't want to be a bad guy. So, because the blame will come on me. Two of them, they have gone already. So, you know, propaganda is something, a speaker has touched before me, that is a lot of power. Now think of that era of Imam Husain, not today. Today is the age of information and mass media and communication and things like that. But think for a moment that period of 1400 years ago. At that time, Yazid, the tyrant ruler, you can't imagine that, how good he was in making propaganda. Majority of those people, they were not aware that Yazid, that guy is doing this thing to the grandson of the Prophet. They came to know much after that. And let me give you an example. And for you who don't know that, I am from India. There is a group which they exist today in this world, which are known as Hussaini Brahmins. And they are Hindus. Why they are known as Hussaini Brahmins? Because they support the cause of Imam Husain. Not they started from today or this 2 centuries back, but some of them, they went at that time to Karbala to help him. When Yazid was gathering the army, he was asking army from different places, from Africa, from Rome, from surrounding this Arabian Peninsula. At the same time, he sent his emissary to India, and that was Kashmir at that time. And the king that was ruling, his name was Vikramaditya. When he was also asked that we need some help because we are fighting someone there, so the king thought that who is this ruler? Because he thought that Yazid himself is a big monarch. And why is he needing that help from me? And he's asking help, a Hindu king from India. So he sent a band of people, a group of people, to go and inquire what's going on there and bring me the report back to me. And they came back and they told their king that there is no such a big nation or an army Yazid is so much afraid of, but they are a group of less than 100 people. And in that group there are women, there are kids. As you have heard before, Dr. Hashim was referring in his video presentation, as small as 6 months baby. They are as old as 100 years old. They are not fighters. They don't have any arms and ammunition. It doesn't seem to no one that they are approaching to be involved in some war. Then this thing got interested then. Why in the world that this guy, Yazid, is so much scared of this small band of people, group, less than 100 people? What is that thing? So he tried to find out for his own self. So he sent a group of people, which number is not, is written in the history, but a very small group, to help not Yazid, but to help this group of people, that they are less than 100 people in this group. That was the family and some friends of Imam Husain. And they were the people that, when they reached Arabia, Karbala, that was the time, according to the Islamic calendar, that was 10th of Muharram, 61 after Hijrah, when they saw this scene, and they could not take, because when they saw that scene, all the blood spread everywhere and all that scene, they could not take it. Because they were a bit late, because that was a time when Imam Husain was very brutally slaughtered by those 30,000 army that you have just listened. So they could not control themselves, they took out their swords and they started getting their own heads. Because of what they saw there, they could not control themselves. Some of them that they remained alive, they came back and they told the story to their king and in Kashmir. And the very first news that reached to beside Arabia, and I think it was very early, that was in Kashmir, the king was told that this had happened there. So ladies and gentlemen, you can understand that the power of propaganda, how much is that? Now you can imagine compared to this time, in the time that we are living, how much power we have and how much power they had at that time, 14 years ago. You can imagine that this evil man, Yazid, how much he worked to make a false propaganda that I'm going to fight with a man who's coming with his army to attack my empire. That was his empire. Brothers and sisters, you know that these Hussaini Brahmins also, in this world today, we talk about pluralistic society. We human beings should live next to each other, all of us, with love and harmony. Let us come and see that Karbala is the message for pluralistic society. And why I'm saying that? We have seen on the video, and let me just go a little detail, that the companions of Imam, the grandson of the Prophet, the people, they were helping him, they were all from various ethnic backgrounds. They were free people, they were slaves, they were people from Africa, from Yemen, from Persia, they were Christians, they were Jews, they were different people. That they were there. Why? Because they were working together for a cause. They were there for some principles. And that is why they were there. And that is a wonderful example of a pluralistic society that we're still talking today, and we want to achieve that in this world of ours. This is a very good message that Imam has sent to the entire humanity. Doesn't matter that. What is your belief and where do you belong? You belong to this human family that we have just talked before so many times. That's a message for everybody. And the misinformation that I was talking before, propaganda, don't think that. Everybody knows that. I don't know how many of you are aware, a few weeks back, a person like Senator Kerry, he's trying to give some information to his colleagues in Congress, and in fact, he's giving a lot of misinformation. Now, he can blame his speechwriter. I know this is the best excuse that. He can say, what can I do? My speechwriter has done that. But there's no excuse. He said that he's speaking and helping his colleagues and telling that Ali was beheaded in Karbala. And Ali was the stepson of Prophet Muhammad, a virtual son, which we never understood what he meant by virtual son. And then he says something that this number 72 that you hear today is still haunting us, the entire humanity. And that is the thing that made me mad. Because 72 is the number that Imam, you just heard that. It's less than 100. It's 72 or less than 100. But most popular, that's 72 people. That. And he's saying that he's trying to make his colleagues understand that why today you're seeing so much chaos and confusion in Iraq. Why? Because the Shias, they never got to rule, and he wants to divide Shias and Sunnis. He may not intend that, intend what may be sincere, I don't know, because God knows better. But in that doing so, he's dividing that community in Iraq, and he's saying that because the Sunnis, they never let Shias to get to rule and have the power, and that is why, because of us, because now we are there in Iraq, we have resolved this problem, and we help Shias to come in power, and that is why you are seeing today the Shias coming so hard, they are coming back to Sunnis so hard. And then I wanted to tell, because we invited Mr. Kerry here to attend this conference, and to tell him that, in fact, from the time we went there, we started the problem. They were not having any problems at that time. But the thing that he says that, this is the height of ignorance. The 72, this number, this figure is haunting us till today, this world. 72 is the number, whether it's Martin Luther King in America, or it's Mahatma Gandhi in India. Or I can bring hundreds of names to you that 72 is not the source of haunting, but is the source of inspiration to humanity. Mahatma Gandhi, when he started his famous Gandhi march against Britishers, go and see what he says, the great man, Mahatma. He says that I'm starting this march, this movement, with 72 people in the name of 72 of Karbala, because to get the inspiration from Imam Husain. And there were thousands of people with him, with Mahatma Gandhi in that march. But he began the march with 72 people. Where are you, Mr. Kerry? Don't blame your speechwriter. You should go and see your references and check that thing. Then you come speak to the audience. So, brothers and sisters, the problem is that there is so much ignorance. That is there why there is a need to come up and speak and let the people know that who was Imam Husain. And what did he do for this humankind? People, they are not aware. Believe me, they are not aware about these things. We are talking about love. You know that when Yazid, he wrote a letter to his governor in Medina and he wanted to oppress Imam and call him in your court and ask him to swear allegiance to you. One of his accomplices, his name was Marwan. If you go and see the history, they were two wicked, the most wicked people of their time. The history writes that. The most evil person of that time. They were staunch enemies of each other. They do not want to see the face of each other. But when it comes to stand against Imam Husain and against goodness, they became friends. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something now. If the hate of Imam Husain can bring these two people together, why not the love of Imam Husain can bring the humanity together? Is it not? Why not? So, brothers and sisters, I can go on and on, but I promised you before, let me just tell you something, that there were some misunderstanding, or there were some people that I was told that when Dr. Hashim was presenting the video, he said something that I was not here and they got hurt, and as far as I understood, I think that was his personal opinion about that matter with the Qamar and with the knife. That is not a rule in jurisprudence, because when it comes to your love and your conviction, it all depends on you, because if you ask me an issue or ruling or ijtihad from the jurisprudence, the love has no bounds and no limits. I know it depends that how you're going to present yourself as far as the mission is concerned, but I know a story of one of the very famous Sahabi of the Prophet, and his name was Uwais al-Qarani. He was a man that he was very much impressed by the Prophet. He has never seen Prophet in his lifetime. He wanted to. But when in one of the defensive battles that Prophet got injured and his teeth got injured, and the news reached Uwais, who has never seen Prophet in his whole life. He was so deeply moved by that incident that he could not control himself. So with the stone, he broke all his teeth because of the deep love there. Now, for many, that step may not be a wise step to do that. But something that is called sincerity, sometimes that is counted. When this news reached Prophet that Uwais has done that, then he has prayed for Uwais Qarani. He admired him, and he said that he appreciated that thing. And there is also a special prayer in our book that is known as Dua Uwais. So the thing is this, what he has said, I was not here, and I want to clarify that thing, that is his own personal opinion. That was not the fatwa that he was giving it to you. I don't think he can give fatwa. So he was not giving that fatwa. I just want to make this clarification that when it comes to love and conviction, that's up to you, but always we should understand that when we want to present a mission, then we should be very careful that that mission should not have a negative impact. That is always noted. So I just want to make that clarification, because there's some young men, they came to me and they have the right to have this clarification. But anyway, so brothers and sisters, again in the last, I really welcome you and thank you, especially all those speakers. Dr. Hashim is also one of the host speakers, not a guest speaker anymore. And Dr. Mellon, I think he's also no more a stranger to us, and he has come from New York, and we are very grateful to you, Dr. Mellon, for your kind words, and very enlightening. And of course, Dr. Shubal and Brother Imam Majid. And I think the rest will, Nicole will take care of that. So I'm leaving you right here with these, my humble words, and I pray for you that may God bless you and give you the best of this world and the world hereafter. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So I want to thank you all again for joining us at this program. It's a great turnout. It looks like on our schedules we're supposed to have time for question and answers, but we've gone over our time limit. So unfortunately we won't continue with that formally right here, but I'm sure Imam Naqvi would be welcoming any questions if anybody has any would like to take a moment on their own as we say goodbye. And as was mentioned, we usually close with Surah Al-Walas. So if you recite with me in Arabic for those who do. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. والآن إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. So assalamu alaikum, peace be upon all of you, and may we take this message with us today, let it live inside us so that we may manifest its message in our actions. Peace be upon you all. Thank you for coming.